Betrayal doesn't simply shatter a heart, it can annihilate an entire life. Those were Meri Brown's first words as she stood in a crowded court, confronting the man she had previously referred to as her husband. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, and the gallery hung on her every word. In the corner of the room, Kody Brown sat with crossed arms, a sour scowl etched across his face. He was accustomed to being in charge, the focal point. But today, under the harsh glare of the courtroom lights, he seemed diminished, trapped. Meri's voice shook initially, but it held resolve. For years I supported him. Through sacrifices, through tears, through constant humiliation. But as I struggled to keep this family on its feet, he was constructing a hidden empire in secret from me. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even Christine and Janelle, seated politely in the gallery, looked at each other with shocked faces. Robyn gripped her purse more tightly, not willing to look elsewhere. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Brown, please continue." And with that, the storm began. Session 2, exposing the betrayal. Meri's lawyer stood tall, holding up a thick folder of documents. "Your Honor, inside this file are bank statements and transfer receipts, proof that Mr. Brown secretly moved family money into private accounts under Robyn's name. Funds that rightfully belonged to all of his wives were funneled into one pocket." The courtroom burst into murmurs. Kody pounded his hand on the table, his face red with anger. "This is sick. She's exaggerating it." The judge held up a hand firmly. "Mr. Brown, please." But Meri didn't budge. She didn't take her eyes off Kody. "You left me in shambles, Kody. As I pleaded for crumbs of your love, you invested in the future of someone else. You didn't just betray me. You erased me." Her words dangled in the air like a sword. Christine shook her head in disbelief, whispering, "Finally the truth is coming out." Janelle nodded silently, her lips pursed. The tension was oppressive. All the individuals in that room could sense the walls closing on Kody Brown. Session 3, Kody fights back. But Kody was not going quietly. He leapt up from his seat, his voice rising. "You think I betrayed you? No, Meri. You betrayed me. You humiliated me in front of the world, pursuing a catfish, ruining the reputation of the family, and now you want to play the victim." Meri's face paled, but she did not break eye contact. Instead, she balled her fists and took a trembling breath. "Yes, I've made errors. But my errors stemmed from loneliness. From being left behind when you had another person on your arm. Don't turn this, Kody. You are the one who broke the covenants first." The room was quiet once more. The judge addressed Kody's lawyer. "Do you have any evidence to counter these financial allegations?" The attorney hesitated before answering. "Your Honor, not at this time." A murmur swept through the courtroom. For the first time, Kody's mask of confidence cracked. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His empire, his control, his carefully built image, it was slipping through his fingers. Session 4. The turning point. Meri's lawyer placed a single page on the judge's desk. "This is the smoking gun. Kody's signature authorizing the transfers. He cannot deny this." The judge read it, then raised his gaze to Kody. "Mr. Brown, is that your signature?" The color was sucked from Kody's face. His lips opened and closed, but nothing emerged. The silence was more piercing than any shout. And then Meri rose, her voice firm now, no longer shaking. "For decades I was the quiet one, the devoted one, the wife who swallowed hurt in order to hold the family together. But not anymore. I won't be silenced. I won't be eliminated. Today, I reclaim my dignity." The gallery audience gasped and murmured. Even Robyn, the once privileged wife, hung her head in shame. The judge brought down the gavel. Order in the court. But the truth was already out, and the balance of power had changed forever. Session 5. The final blow. The courtroom was breathless. Kody slumped back in his chair, his erstwhile fiery face now broken, defeated. He muttered, "You don't understand. I did what I had to do." Meri shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with tears but burning with determination. "No, Kody, you did what you wanted to do, and now the world finally sees you for who you are." The judge cleared his throat. "On the basis of evidence heard, this court recognizes Mr. Brown's misbehavior. Additional hearings will decide restitution. For the meantime, Mrs. Brown, your bravery has brought the truth to light. The gavel came down. Bang, bang. The crowd erupted into cheers, some of applause, some in shock. Christine squeezed Janelle's hand tightly, barely able to whisper, "She did it. She finally did it." And when Meri came out of that courtroom, her head held high, the cameras blazed brighter than ever. She was no longer the neglected wife in Kody Brown's shadow. She was the woman who took him to court. In one, betrayal doesn't just break a heart, it can destroy a whole life. Meri Brown's words sliced through the thick silence of the courtroom, like a knife. Her voice, low and resolute, sent a chill down the spines of those in attendance. The cameras popped, their bulbs firing with every move she made. Reporters wrote furiously, scratching pens against notepads, as if the world itself were clutching for this moment, not to let it slip away. Behind them, the gallery huddled forward as a single body, wide eyes, shallow breathing, hungry for what was coming. At the defense table was Kody Brown, formerly the self-styled patriarch of a vast family kingdom, now another man bathed in the unforgiving light of the courtroom. His golden locks, once so much his pride, were disheveled and slick with perspiration. His arms folded tightly on his chest, and a sullen scowl contorted his lips. He squirmed uncomfortably, attempting to convey confidence, but his stance betrayed him. For the first time in decades, Kody Brown was not in control. Meri's hand trembled slightly as she gripped the wooden stand before her, but her eyes, dark, wounded and determined, never wavered. She looked straight ahead, as though locking her gaze on an invisible point of strength. "Years," she started, her voice now imbued with more authority. "I stood by him, through sacrifices no one noticed, through tears that dropped in secret, through humiliation that pulverized me, while I smiled for the cameras." Her words rang out, echoing against the walls of the courtroom, creating gasps and murmurs among the audience. Christine Brown, seated in the front row of the gallery, pressed a hand to her lips. Her eyes, usually filled with warmth, were glassy with emotion. She whispered to Janelle beside her, "She's finally saying it. Everything we've all felt, but never dared to say out loud." Janelle nodded gravely, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her usually placid face was strained, her lips pursed into a thin line. For years she had endured silently her own portion of neglect. But watching Meri stand before the judge filled her with a sense of vindication. And Robyn, sitting 2 rows back from Christine and Janelle, Robyn Brown gripped her bag so tightly that her knuckles blanched. Her eyes scoured the courtroom nervously, avoiding anyone's eye. Her lips moved soundlessly, as if reciting a prayer, or perhaps going over a defense for the instant when all eyes would surely fall on her. For everyone knew, Robyn was at the center of it all. Meri's voice grew louder, sharper now, like a fire increasing oxygen. "But while I struggled to preserve this family, he created something else. Not a home, not a family, but a secret empire. Constructed in the shadows behind my back. Constructed upon lies. Constructed with funds that did not belong to him alone." The words hit like thunder. Gasps ran through the gallery, louder this time, echoing like waves. The reporters looked at each other, their eyes wide with the zing of a headline that threatened to shake reality television to its foundations. Kody's scowl grew darker, his jaw clenching until it seemed as if it might break. He bent forward toward his lawyer, and hissed softly, his lips hardly moving, but the rage so intense that from across the room he seemed to be emitting heat. The judge, a graying man with silver hair and piercing eyes, tilted forward in his chair. His own voice, steady but authoritative, rose above the murmurs. "Mrs. Brown, continue." The resultant silence was thick, dense, with tension, as if the whole court held its breath. Meri blinked, her eyes closed for a fleeting second, balancing herself, and when she opened them once more, her shaking had ceased. Her voice, next, left her lips, not as a wail of a victim, but as a war cry. "I was his first wife. I was there when there was nothing, when the family was a fantasy, when we had no money, no fame, no cameras. I gave everything, my youth, my loyalty, my heart. And what did I get in return? Lies, abandonment, and the shame of being discarded for someone else." Her gaze flicked, just for a second, to Robyn. The gallery picked up on it. Everybody picked up on it. and whispers broke out once more, the name Robyn spreading through the audience like wildfire. Robyn ducked her head, her cheeks burning bright red. She fidgeted in her seat, hoping she could blend into the wood of the bench. Christine's lips curled into a tiny bitter smile. She leaned in towards Janelle once more and breathed. About time the world saw this side of him. Janelle didn't smile. Her expression was serious, her eyes set tightly on Meri, but a fierce glint danced in her eyes. Pride. Kody brought his hand down hard on the table, and the sound of it rocked the room like a gunshot. "That's a lie," he growled, his voice husky with anger. "She's manipulating everything for attention." Gasps and whispers surged again, the tension in the room building to a fever pitch. The judge's gavel dropped hard. "Bang, bang, Mr. Brown," snapped the judge, his eyebrows narrowing. "This is a court of law. You will sit back and be still until it is your time to speak." Another such outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Kody's face grew red, his lips twisting into a scowl. He sat back in his chair, but the blaze in his eyes burned more fiercely than ever. Meri did not even blink. She had lived in his shadow for so long that she was not intimidated now. She spoke again to the judge, her tone even and measured. "He left me when I needed him most," she explained. "He showered all his love, all his attention, and all his resources on one wife, and left the rest of us behind. And while I was mourning, while I was alone, while I was struggling just to keep my head above water, he was quietly transferring funds. Our funds, my funds, funds that were meant for the family. He diverted it to accounts I had no idea even existed. He created a future for one individual, while erasing me." The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Reporters scribbled so furiously it sounded like rain hitting paper. Christine's jaw tightened, her anger visible now. Janelle sat stiffly, her knuckles white as she gripped her seat. Robyn's eyes glistened, but whether with guilt, fear, or both, no one could tell. Meri's words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with raw truth. Kody shifted once more, his gaze snapping towards Robyn, who stubbornly avoided meeting his eye. For the first time, the cracks in his well-constructed facade were apparent to all of those in the room. And then Meri landed the coup de grace of her introduction. "He didn't just betray me," she said, her voice crashing like a bell. "He betrayed this whole family. Every promise, every vow, every word he ever uttered. It was all a lie." The gallery was a scene of pandemonium. Some gasped, some whispered, others shook their heads in amazement. The bailiff raised his hands, attempting to calm the crowd. The judge's gavel came down again. Bang, 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 bang. "Order, I will have order in my courtroom." The room stilled, though the tension still rode the air like static. The judge gazed at Meri, his face impassive. "Mrs. Brown," he stated neutrally, "you may proceed." Meri drew a deep breath. She glanced again at Kody, her erstwhile husband, her betrayer, the man who had expected she would never strike back. And then, in a voice as firm as granite, she stated, "Your Honor, this is not simply about money. This is about dignity. This is about truth. And I am here to ensure the truth is heard." And with that, the storm really started. The judge's gavel still echoed faintly when Meri's lawyer rose from his chair. Tall, composed, and carrying a thick folder under his arm, he moved toward the bench, with the calm certainty of a man who knew he held dynamite in his hands. "Your Honor," he started, his tone even but strong. "This case isn't about guesswork, nor is it about resentment between husband and wife. This case is about facts, firm, irrefutable evidence that Mr. Brown channeled family money into hidden accounts in the name of Robyn Brown." The whole courtroom breathed in simultaneously. Even the ceiling fans, whirring steadily overhead, seemed to stop and listen, in anticipation of what was to be said next. Christine's hands shot up to her mouth. Janelle's eyes went narrow, her back stiffening as she leaned forward. Robyn's face went white, her fingers jumping nervously at the buckle of her purse. The attorney dropped the folder in front of the judge and opened it slowly, with deliberation, as if he were revealing a gun. He retrieved the first paper. "Bank statement dated March 14th, he stated, passing it to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. "A withdrawal of $25,000 from the family joint account to a private account under Robyn Sullivan Brown." The judge's eyebrows knitted together as he read the paper. The courtroom erupted with whispers, the name Robyn spreading from end to end like wildfire. Another, the attorney went on, holding up a second sheet. June 3rd, $40,000. Same transfer route, same account. Another document. August 21st, $18,500. Another, November 11th, $32,000. When he placed the final paper on the judge's desk, the stack of evidence resembled a mountain. This, the attorney asserted, his voice resonating with power, is not the action of a husband providing equally for his whole family. This is the action of a man piping collective wealth into one pocket, and that pocket, Your Honor, is Robyn Brown's. The words struck the courtroom with a force like an earthquake. They shifted in their seats. Some gasped in shock. Others shook their heads, incredulous. Reporters wrote so rapidly their pens scratched like fire on paper. Meri stared intently at the table, her jaw set hard, her knuckles white around the wood. She had expected this day, but to see the evidence spread out so publicly stung more than she had anticipated. Christine moved in closer to Janelle, her words a burning whisper. He was stealing from us blind. All along while we suffered, he was rigging Robyn. Janelle's head nodded, her words barely above a whisper. And he believed we'd never catch on. But all attention jumped to Kody. Kody Brown was no longer sitting back with smug conceit. His body tensed, his fists clenched on the table, his face turned bright red, his eyes moving wildly between the papers and the judge. He resembled a man trapped, his once booming confidence dwindling beneath the crush of cold hard fact. He finally snapped. He jumped to his feet, his chair scraping backward, his voice booming across the room. "This is absurd," he yelled, his voice cracking with anger. "This isn't betrayal, it's looking to the future. That money was my to transfer, my to guard, and my to determine how to spend." The gavel came crashing down. Bang, bang, "Mr. Brown, sit down at once," the judge shouted. "You will not disrupt this court again." Kody stood stock still, his chest pumping, his fists still shaking at his sides. Cautiously, reluctantly, he sat back down, shooting Meri daggers. The attorney cocked an eyebrow, then addressed the judge again. "You see, Your Honor, Mr. Brown is not going to be able to deny the transfers. He is merely going to try to explain them instead. Intent is not on the table when trust and community assets are violated. These were not his money to transfer, they were community funds." He turned, addressing the gallery now. His voice grew louder, ringing through the room. And while the other wives struggled, while Meri was left alone in an empty house, while Christine bore the emotional burden of children without assistance, while Janelle worked herself to the point of collapse, Kody Brown was quietly accumulating a safety net for Robyn, a different empire, a betrayal not only of one wife, but of all. The room let out a collective gasp, and murmur again, more loudly this time. The bailiff stood up, holding his hands out for silence. Robyn cowered in her seat, her lips quivering as she finally met eyes with the judge. Her eyes were full of tears, though whether they were tears of shame, fear, or guilt, no one knew. She muttered something beneath her breath, grasping her purse like a lifeline. Christine stood up suddenly, no longer able to contain herself. "Your Honor, I'd like to say something." The judge's eyes widened in shock. "Mrs. Christine Brown, you are not a party to this case. Please sit down." Christine paused, her eyes burning, then took a seat again. But the damage had been done. Everyone had witnessed her anger, her truth rising to the surface. Meri finally raised her head, eyes wet but clear. She stared straight at Kody, and for the first time in decades, he avoided her eyes. Her attorney went on, his voice gentler now, nearly mournful. "Your Honor, betrayal is not always boisterous. Sometimes it occurs softly, in darkness, behind doors. But be assured, what we witness here is betrayal of the utmost degree, economic, emotional, spiritual. The bedrock of trust has been destroyed." The judge rested back in his chair, his face stern. The judge rested back in his chair, his face stern. He aligned the papers in front of him, wrapping them once on the surface. "Mr. Brown," the judge began slowly, his gaze holding Kody's. "Do you contest that these are your signatures on these transfers?" The room became as silent as a tomb. There was no cough, no shuffle, no hum of the fans above. Kody's mouth dropped open, then slammed shut. His Adam's apple dropped in a swallow. Sweat beads formed on his forehead. His normally confident eyes darted frantically around the room, caught for an instant on Robyn, and immediately dropped to the floor. At last he grunted, his voice barely audible and coarse. "No, they're mine." The room burst into pandemonium. Gasps, cries, incredulity, even applause erupted. The bailiff yelled for order. The judge pounded his gavel repeatedly. Bang! Bang! Christine put her hand over her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears. Janelle shook her head, mouthing, "He finally told the truth." Robyn's face had turned ghostly pale. She whispered, "Kody," before her voice cracked and broke off. And Meri? Meri towered over herself, for the first time in years. Her shaking was replaced with a still, unshakable resolve. She had waited for this moment. She had prayed for this moment. The truth was out, and Kody Brown's dominion of control was in ruins. The silence that followed Kody's grudging confession was like a storm waiting to erupt. His words, "No, they're mine," still lingered in the air, vibrating like a clanged bell. The audience was still abuzz with incredulity, but the judge's quick gavel had silenced them back into line. For an instant, the only sound could be heard was the sound of the courtroom clock ticking steadily, and the shallow gasps of a man who was losing his empire. But Kody Brown was not an easy man to give up on. Abruptly, he stiffened in his seat, his face setting in a look of defiance. His fists curled on the table, and he leapt to his feet with an athleticism that shook his chair. "You believe you've got me cornered?" His voice thundered through the court, each word thick with anger. "No, you've distorted the narrative. You've made my sacrifices sound like betrayal, my duties crimes. But let me tell you all, Meri isn't innocent in all this. None of them are." The room gasped. Meri bristled, but her eyes remained steady. Christine tightened her jaw, while Janelle went rigid, her knuckles whitening on the bench. The judge's voice snapped cold. "Mr. Brown, you may speak, but stay on point. This is a courtroom, not a theater." But Kody's rage had already gotten the best of him. His voice was thick with venom, as he shook his finger at Meri. "She wishes to play the victim, but do you remember the catfishing debacle? Do you remember when she duped me? When she embarrassed this family on national TV, flirting with a stranger behind my back? She annihilated trust long before I ever spent a single dollar." Gasp after gasp resounded again, reporters rushing to write more. Robyn winced at the words, her gaze jumping frantically to Meri. Christine growled under her breath. "Here we go." Meri's mouth twisted into a thin line, her shoulders rigid, but she didn't say a word yet. She let him rant, each sentence burying him deeper. Kody slammed the table with his hand. "She is no martyr. She is an attention seeker, desperate to portray herself as noble while ruining my reputation. She left this family years ago, and now, after all that, she has the temerity to accuse me of treason?" He chuckled cynically, the tone empty and piercing. "The hypocrisy is revolting." The gallery buzzed once more, whispers flying like arrows. Some nodded at Kody's reminder, remembering the public scandal. Others shook their heads, refusing to allow him to spin the narrative away from his own deceptions. Christine leapt to her feet, her voice trembling with rage. "Don't you dare, Kody, don't you dare place all of this blame on Meri. She was lonely, forsaken, discarded by you. And we all saw it, we lived it." The bailiff held up a hand, telling Christine to sit, but words were already in and had landed. Janelle leaned forward, her voice even but unyielding. "This isn't about Meri's history of messes. This is about what you did, Kody. What you've been doing for years." Robyn hid in her hands, muttering something no one quite heard. Her shoulders trembled with either sobs or shame. Kody turned to the gallery, his finger poking at Christine and Janelle. "Oh, sure, you two are having a good time, aren't you? Ooh. Sitting there like saints while you fan this flame. 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 Hebben sitjes pelden mee te sing. Wat oor schuld one defane. Befeen verparter." "You think I don't know how you've betrayed me? How you've poisoned the family against me? Christine, you walked away, you quit. And Janelle, you never stood up for me as a wife should. You all turned your backs long before I defended myself." The words cut through the air like a knife. Christine's face flushed red, her hands shaking in her lap. Janelle was as rigid as a stone, her face expressionless, though her eyes were full of anger. But the lowest blow was yet to come. Kody faced Meri, his tone dropping low, almost a hiss. You speak of betrayal, Meri. Let's discuss betrayal. For years you weren't even truly my wife. You were a ghost sitting in the corner. You held on to the name, but you weren't there for me, not truly. And now you want to destroy me with deceit. Meri finally spoke up. She slowly got up, her movements slow, her eyes fixed on Kody. Her voice shook at first, but became firm as she continued speaking. Do you want to bring my errors into this courtroom? Fine. I made errors. I was lonely. I was abandoned. I stretched for something, anything that would make me feel as if I counted. And yes, I fell into something stupid. But I did not betray you, Kody. I was already betrayed. Her words shattered like thunder. The audience gasped. Christine's eyes sparkled with tears. Janelle nodded gently, and even Robyn poked up through her fingers, amazed. Meri's voice swelled, mounting like a wave. You left me before that. You left me for Robyn. You left me in a cold house, alone while you started your life elsewhere. You want to discuss ghosts. You made me one. The judge banged the gavel. Bang, bang. Order. But now the courtroom was alive, crackling with raw electricity. Kody, panting harshly, slammed back into his chair, searing holes in Meri with his eyes. His confidence was unraveling, but his obstinacy endured. His lawyer leaned close to him, whispering wildly, attempting to placate the tempest. But Kody pushed him away. No, they need to hear this, he snarled. He glanced over at the judge. I transferred the money because I had no option. Because I couldn't trust any of them. Because I knew someday they'd all turn against me, just as they are today. And guess what? I was right. He pointed a finger at Meri once more. She says I am a betrayer. But I say she is ungrateful. I say they are all ungrateful. All that I created for them. And this is their gratitude? His words had rung out before, but now they sounded hollow. The courtroom was no longer alive with sympathy. It vibrated with judgment. His fury made him seem less of a leader, and more of a man coming apart. The judge hunched forward, his voice stern. Mr. Brown, this court isn't interested in retrying the private shortcomings of your marriages. It is interested in deciding whether you abuse joint family money. Stay on subject. Kody's chest expanded, and then dropped sharply. His jaw creaked. But the battle in his eyes flickered a bit, like a flame with too little oxygen. Meri, on the other hand, didn't flinch, her tears sparkling but her voice firm. You can spin my errors, Kody. You can yell and wave your fingers. But the facts are clear. You created a kingdom of deceptions, and now it's coming down. And you can't yell your way out of it. The courtroom exploded again, the voices swelling like thunder. The bailiff cried for order. The gavel struck again, but the truth would not be stilled. In that instant, everyone in that courtroom could see it plain. Kody Brown was no longer the unassailable patriarch. He was a man on the run, his mask torn from his face, his desperation laid open. And Meri, no longer the meek, shattered wife. She was the adversary. The warrior, the one finally standing tall against the tempest. And the fight was far from done. The courtroom was thick with tension. Every chair was occupied. Every reporter's pen poised like a sword over paper. Even the fluorescent lights hummed more loudly, shining down upon the perspiration beading Kody Brown's forehead. He sat tense, with his arms folded across his chest, his jaw clenched. His tantrum had left the courtroom heavy with fury, but it had left him vulnerable as well. And now Meri's side was poised to attack. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Brown, you may now present your evidence. Meri looked at her lawyer, who rose and approached the bench with a large sealed envelope. The ripping sound of the seal was heard in the quiet room, as if the paper itself was aware that it was embarking on a journey with the power of truth. Within were piles of documents, every one stamped and labeled. The lawyer fanned them out on the evidence table. Your Honor, these are bank statements, wire transfers and shell company records, all leading back to Mr. Brown. They reveal money transferred not for family consumption, but into private accounts that he controls. Secret accounts. A silence fell. Then gasps. Kody's face paled for the first time that day. He edged in his seat,
eyes scanning frantically as though seeking an exit. The lawyer went on, his tone slicing through the quiet. We have evidence that during the past 5 years Mr. Brown siphoned over $600,000 from the joint accounts of the family into these organizations. Organizations with direct connection to his name, or to associates with only him in common.
Boss had no idea. None of them. Mary's eyes flashed as she gazed in the direction of the judge. He was telling us for years we were broke, that we had to make sacrifices, that we could not buy houses, that our children had to accept less. While he was keeping this from us, living like a king in secret. Christine stood up from the gallery abruptly, her voice shaking. I told you something was off. He always said I was selfish for needing security for our children. And all the while, she stopped, shaking her head, sobbing. Janelle held Christine's arm to support her, tears welling in her own eyes. He deceived all of us. We were struggling. And her voice broke, while he was making his getaway. Robyn laid a shaking hand over her lips. She paled and her shoulders sagged. For the first time, she couldn't find the words to justify him. The judge leaned forward, reading the documents. Mr. Brown, these documents look straightforward. Do you have anything to say? Kody's jaw dropped, then snapped shut. He fidgeted with his collar, his face flushed. Those monies, they were for security. For the future. You don't know the pressure I've been under. I had to plan ahead. I had to take care of myself, because I knew this day would arrive. I couldn't trust them. His words, intended as a defense, only inflamed the wound. The gallery burst out once more. The cry of disgust and disbelief spreading like wildfire. Mary's lawyer picked up the last sheet of paper, holding it aloft. And if that's not enough, Your Honor, this is an email exchange between Mr. Brown and an Arizona property developer. In it, Mr. Brown talks about purchasing an upscale house in a corporate cover. He writes, and I quote, "This will be mine alone. They'll never touch it." The crowd gasped as if the ground had suddenly opened beneath them. Christine's jaw fell. Janelle's mouth dropped open in shock. Robyn's shoulders sagged, her face hidden in her hands, as if the words themselves were knives. Meri, her voice shaking but firm, addressed Kody directly. You told us family was paramount. You told us we were all in it together. And while you were doing that, you were typing up emails about how we'd never get our hands on what you were appropriating. That wasn't for our protection, Kody. That was a lie. The most fundamental kind. Kody's face twisted in anger. He pounded his hand on the table, and the microphones twitched. You think you're saints? You all took advantage of me. You drained me. I carried all of you on my back for years. And now you're playing victim? I earned that money. I deserve to have something of my own. The gavel cracked like thunder, and the judge shouted out, Mr. Brown, one more word and I will hold you in contempt. But it was too late. His rage had eroded the last shred of sympathy. Mary's attorney walked calmly back to their table, placing the final piece of evidence down. His voice was measured, deliberate. Your Honor, the facts are undeniable. Mr. Brown knowingly hid funds, moved assets into secret accounts, and planned a separate life while deceiving every member of his family. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's premeditated betrayal. The words landed like a hammer. Mary's eyes filled with tears as she turned toward the gallery. Christine gave her a small nod of solidarity. Janelle placed a hand over her heart. Even Robyn, torn between loyalty and truth, finally looked at Meri, her expression filled with something resembling guilt. The judge leaned back in his chair, interlocking his fingers. I will scrutinize this evidence thoroughly. But from what I see here, this court is strongly inclined towards the verdict that Mr. Brown misused joint family funds for personal use. The courtroom exploded. The reporters vied to get the quote, cameras snapping wildly. Kody slumped in his chair, his shoulders at last buckling. The once boastful patriarch was a man stripped naked, his empire falling apart thread by thread. But Meri did not gaze at him in victory. She gazed at him with something heavier, sorrow. Her voice, quiet but piercing, cut across the silence. Betrayal doesn't only shatter a heart, Kody. It ruins lives. You didn't only betray me, you betrayed all of us. Christine openly wept. Janelle brushed tears from her eyes. Robyn shook with fear, muttering, "How could you?" The judge rapped his gavel a final time. "Court will adjourn until tomorrow morning. We will resume for closing arguments." That was that. But the tale was far from finished. As people streamed out, the cameras rolled it all. Meri standing proud, tears streaming down her face, but defiance burning in her eyes. Christine and Janelle side by side, standing in mutual support. Robyn bringing up the rear, face ashen, suspended between the man she once stood up for, and the reality she could no longer ignore. And Kody Brown, sitting alone at his table, regarding the stack of evidence that had finally brought him to his knees. The moment of truth had arrived. The patriarch's defenses had been breached, and the last great battle, closing arguments, would determine his destiny forevermore. The following morning, the courtroom seemed heavier still. The seats were filled quicker, reporters shoving one another for unobstructed sight. The gallery hummed with hushed forecasts, as if gamblers waiting for the ultimate bout. Kody Brown arrived first, his swagger diminished, his shoulders were stooped, his eyes hollow from lack of sleep. His suit, crisp when he first arrived, seemed creased. He had the demeanor of a man heading to his own execution. Meri arrived shortly after. She had on a navy blue dress, chin held high, steps measured. Christine and Janelle walked beside her as quiet bodyguards, their very presence exuding quiet support. Robyn even sat across from her, eyes pale, divided but there. The judge arrived, his robe swishing as he sat down. The gavel came down. Bang! Court is now in session. We will hear closing arguments before I deliver my ruling. Meri's side speaks. Meri's lawyer stood up, his tone firm and authoritative. Your Honor, what we've seen in this courtroom isn't just about numbers on a page. It's about a man who built his power on deception. Brown convinced his wives and children that their sacrifices were for the good of the family, while secretly lining his own pockets. He held up the damning email again, his voice rising. This is not an error, this is intent. He designed a life where he would be alone, rich and secure, while the women who trusted him were destroyed. That's not leadership, Your Honor, that's betrayal. He paused, then pointed to Meri. And yet, in spite of this betrayal, Mrs. Brown has stood here with courage. She has uncovered the truth, not for vengeance, but for justice. Justice for herself, her children, and for every individual lied to by this man's kingdom of deceit. Meri bent her head, silently crying tears down her face. The gallery echoed in assent. Kody's desperate plea. Kody's lawyer stood up next, his voice defensive. Your Honor, Mr. Brown acknowledges errors were made, but he maintains these funds weren't stolen. They were saved. He bore the responsibility of supporting a huge family. He planned for the future because he was afraid that anarchy would destroy them, and unfortunately his fears were realized. Then Kody himself rose, his voice broke as he spoke to the judge. I loved my family, I did everything I did for them. Yes, I wanted something for myself. I won't lie about that. But doesn't every man deserve that? They make me out to be a monster, but they forget the years I sacrificed too. I provided for them, I housed them, I cared for them. And now, because I provided for a future they don't approve of, I'm the villain? His words sounded empty. Christine grumbled from the balcony, just audibly enough to be overheard. You weren't planning for us, you were planning without us. The courtroom silently agreed. The judge delivers the verdict. The judge leaned forward, his face serious. I have considered the evidence carefully. Mr. Brown, this court concludes conclusive evidence that you embezzled joint family funds, diverted money into secret accounts, and deceived those who trusted you. Your argument of protection avails nothing against the clear intent in your own words. He shifted his attention to Kody. You did not act as a protector, you acted as a deceiver. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Thus this court holds for Mrs. Brown. Restitution hearings will take place, and steps will be taken to recoup the embezzled money. Immediately Mr. Brown is prohibited from making any standalone withdrawals or transfers. Your financial reign is at an end. The gavel came down 3 times. Bang, 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 bang. The room exploded. Reporters yelled into microphones. Phones flashed. Pens zipped across notepads. The fallout in the courtroom. Christine smacked her hands together once, tears falling down her face. Finally, justice. Janelle hugged Meri tightly, leaning into her. You did it. You stood up when no one else could. Meri shook, clinging to them both, her tears a combination of relief and exhaustion. On the other side of the aisle, Robyn stiffened. Her lips trembled, her fingers wrapped tightly around her purse. She muttered, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But her words were lost amidst the uproar. Kody, on the other hand, slumped into his seat. His face was pale, his mouth gaping open. The powerful patriarch of a one-time great kingdom now resembled a deposed king who had lost his crown. He muttered under his breath, but the microphones caught it. They'll regret this. They'll all regret this. But the power in his words was gone. Meri's final words. When the noise died down, Meri stood and addressed the judge. Her voice was soft but carried through the room. Your Honor, thank you. This isn't just about money. This is about truth. About finally being seen after years of silence. About reminding every woman that her voice matters, no matter how long it's been ignored. She turned toward Kody, her eyes fierce through tears. You said I was invisible. You said I was replaceable. But today shows you that I am greater than your deception. You attempted to erase me, Kody, but all you managed was to make me find my voice. The room was sent into awed silence. Even the judge appeared to be affected. Christine breathed. That's the Meri I knew was in there. The exit. The gavel hit hard for the second time. Court is adjourned. Meri exited with Christine and Janelle on either side. The reporters hounded her, crying out questions. But she didn't halt. She merely lifted her head even higher, allowing the cameras to see the face of a woman renewed. Robyn managed to slip out behind them, her countenance pale and expressionless. Some claim she wept that evening, realizing at last the extent of Kody's betrayal. And Kody? He sat through all the emptying of the courtroom, looking at the stack of evidence in front of him. His empire had fallen, his reputation damaged, his dominance lost. For the first time, Kody Brown was alone. Closing narration, YouTube-style hook, for ending, and so Meri Brown walked out not just as a wife betrayed, but as a woman victorious. She had faced her greatest enemy, the man who once claimed to love her, and stripped him of the lies that had bound her. The courtroom had witnessed history, the fall of Kody Brown's power, and the rise of Meri's voice. But one question lingered as the cameras flashed. What does a man do when he's lost everything and has nothing left to lose? Because for Kody Brown, this wasn't an ending. This was the start of a reckoning.